So there's a misconception that if you're single, you are incomplete, perhaps damaged, salvaged, and you won't be happy until you find your one. And that is not true. That is bullshit. It is a message that has been fed to us by media and advertising. The truth is, when you're single, you have the richest soil for growth. That's why I created this podcast. And unlike other podcasts, this one is host-driven, not guest-driven. That means I will be rotating health and wellness experts 3 times a week to give you the giant box of wellness crayons, not just the primary colors, so you can start building a meaningful life. It's time to give singlehood a cape. Sean, first I just want to thank you for being a host and a contributor to this podcast. I know you're going to create I feel like you're going to create a dialogue that's going to shed light on addiction, love addiction, sex addiction, all of that. So thank you for jumping back on the what do I call it? John Kim's fuck truck.
Yeah, it was the email you sent to all of us. I'm about it. I love that. Use that more often.
Hey, before we get into addiction, and by the way, man, you know what I love about you is there's a lot of coaches out there, a lot of therapists, a lot of people who I call them copy and paste coaches. They kind of take what is trending or they've learned some stuff in school and all that. But man, I feel like you've really, your life is your education. So I feel like you've lived it and you're still living it. So when I say that you speak the language, I say that because you're practicing in life. It's not just like you're reading books, taking information and regurgitating. I feel like you pull from your own life, and you have been for so long. So there's so much truth there.
I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate it. One, I always repeat the phrase that you coined for me years ago that, that I speak the language. And I mean, you're right. We all have to walk our talk, therapists, coaches, mentors, counselors, whatever. I mean, if you don't, it's kind of inauthentic, or it's like, where are you pulling that energy from if you're not doing what you would advise people to do? Now, that said, people are human. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you got to be perfect, but it's a blessing. When I'm at my most, what do you call it? Sublime, which is a word I seldom use, right? That's one of those highfalutin words. Although, I like my big vocabulary, but
also a song from the 90s.
That's right.
Or a band or a song. Yeah.
Band. That was your arena, man. That was all that Cali stuff. It was amazing. Our arena. But recovery changed my life from sex and love addiction, and I know we'll get into it. And I have to live that. I have to live that, or I'll destroy myself and I'll destroy my relationships around me. Yeah. And then as a bonus, I'm even not more rigid on myself, but I really keep myself in check with my sponsor and my sponsees and my therapist, and then my clients. And one of the things working with like the TAT Lab, your TAT Lab, and how we did that for 2+ years during, had that cohort during the pandemic was, I got a lot of feedback about like, holy shit, dude, you just told us X, Y, and Z. Like that happened to you. Like you're being like honest. And I was like, what else am I going to do? I got to tell you guys how I did it. And it wasn't pretty. And it doesn't have to be pretty for you too. You just got to keep at it.
Hey, Vanessa said the other day when I pitched her, hey, I said, I'm going to do single on purpose, a podcast. Instead of just me, I'm going to bring on a team. We're going to rotate. I got all excited. I was pitching her this thing. She's like, oh, you're just turning the Tat Lab into a podcast. I was like, no, what are you talking about? I was like, fuck you. What are you talking about? That was beautiful. That has ended like summer camp, and now I'm doing something new. She's like, oh, it just sounds like Tat Lab the podcast. Anyway,
but that's not a bad thing. I mean, I get it. It's kind of like productive, but it's also not a bad thing. It was a wonderful community, and I don't know how much you talked about. I presume a bit, but man, it was a great opportunity, and it really, what an unprecedented time, man. What a historical period we have now experienced as adults, or whatever age you were, and where we really all had to pivot toward each other, which is what I wish we would do anyway more often. And I'm sure you do as a therapist, concerned about people's well-being, their emotional, spiritual, and physical health. It's very American to just do the individualistic buck up, bootstrap bullshit. And instead we're like, holy shit, this is tough and bizarre. Let's all hang out and offload and hear each other's stories. Like we say in 12-step, experience, strength, and hope. And it was a beautiful experience, man. I'm really grateful that you opened that door, and I'm grateful for everybody who walked through it.
Yeah, and just a footnote, if you're listening and you don't know what the hell we're talking about, during the pandemic, I said, we're all stuck at home. Let's use Zoom as a therapeutic tool. Let's connect people. And I reached out to Sean and a few other people, and we started running Zoom groups. And we helped thousands in 2 years, and then recently just kind of closed it. It felt right. And it was never meant to be something. And I learned this because I tried to scale it. We created an app. And I realized, you know what? Everything doesn't have to be scaled. And that was, it was like a magical summer. We went deep with a lot of people, and it was magical. And so that's what the Tat Lab was. And now that has expired, I have more time for more projects, and this being one of them, Single on Purpose, the podcast. So Sean, before we get into addiction, I want to do something. I want to go into my little time machine. All right. This is for me, not for the audience, but we're going to do stuff for the audience in a bit. 2001, or maybe even like 2000. It was, in my opinion, the peak of hip hop. Before you and I were married, we were dating, we had girlfriends. This is before
we were dating each other, which would have been fine. Which would have been fine. You're a very handsome dude.
The Hollywood Canteen, spoken word, screenwriting. I think you were reading at some really big agencies, and this is before The Children. So this is before insomnia and stress, and I think even before your addiction. I'm not sure, but because when I think back, about those times, there are a lot of happy moments, man. And what was the good of those times when you look back?
The good of those times, and I'm sorry if you can hear some background noise.
That's okay.
I'll be over in a second.
Yeah, no worries.
The good of those times, it's really interesting. You talk about right around the millennium. So you knew my little cadre of friends. We also had Hollywood friends. We had friends, and I think I really relied on the comfort of friends, the comfort of your club, the canteen, the ability to, lose myself in the presence of others for a little bit, but not, it would only be later that I find out that was in a real escapist way. And the reason why I say that is because I was in the addiction even during those years. Dude, I've been an addict since I was exposed at 9 to hardcore pornography, which is why when people and I start to argue, I don't tend to argue. I just kind of sit back and let them opine. But when people start to argue about the DSM-5 or whatever, who says what about what's an addiction or not, I don't even really jump into that. I don't care. I just know that my personal experience and the experience of, thousands of people now that I've met at retreats, conventions, weekend getaways, whatever it is, conferences or Zooms like we did with Tat Lab. I know that there are millions, probably statistically, who simply cannot stop, who are powerless over an addiction around sex, whatever it is, whether it's porn, whether it's prostitution, whether it's multiple partners and you're unsafe, like however it comes out, whether it's love addiction, it's more.
So that time, was it a giant trigger for you then at that time? Because we just kind of met, we were friendly. We had started, hanging out together, coffee shops, writing screenplays and all that.
Right.
But if you were also struggling with addiction, I can imagine when you were at the canteen, there was nothing but beautiful people, and there was a lot of fantasy in that.
There's a lot of fantasy in that, and believe it or not, there are people who specifically ID as fantasy addicts in this larger umbrella of sex and love addiction. And then the codependents are in there somewhere as well. Yeah. But it wasn't always triggering, John, to be around beautiful people. I don't need to tell you, you're still out there, even if you're in the burbs now with your family and everything. There's beautiful people everywhere out there. Right? There's beautiful people everywhere, period. But Jesus, especially LA. And so, no, it was not a nonstop trigger. And And also the addiction sometimes goes quiet. It could be quiet for months. It could be quiet for a year where you're just like, oh, but I eventually hit bottom. People eventually hit a bottom. And that's a crucial pivot, right? It's like, keep banging my head against the wall, right? The definition of insanity, the meme we've all seen, and expecting different results.
Right.
Or, fuck, I need to do something about this. You're right. It was pre-kids. It was during our screenwriting heyday, meeting at the club, meeting at the cafes. And basically what it was most often like was me sitting there talking with you, writing, interacting with people, as affable as I am now. And, you know, not to blow myself up, but I mean, I'm pretty good in a social setting.
Yeah.
And yet at that time, so much drama, so much stress, so much shame behind my eyes, just right behind what you could see.
Right.
Me just wrestling this gorilla, dude, this monkey.
Yeah. So I didn't know that about you. And so what I experienced was, you know, the light, charismatic, fun screenwriter, our banter, hanging out. You know, I also know that you love music and hip hop and all of that. And we had a friend in common. So it was, I mean, there were some dark times there for me as well, but it was very, felt kind of magical, you know?
Yeah.
And it only lasted about a year or two.
Well, I mean, you know, maybe it was an early peak, but I'll tell you what, man. There's a lot of the shit that I say, especially that comes from 12-step or from my therapist, my former therapist, who also comes from 12-step. A lot of things I say are like cliched, but one of them is, but it's true. It's cliche because it's true. One of them is my best day in active addiction can't compare to even like one of my worst days in active recovery. So because even if you're having a great fucking time, you're at the club, it's that spoken word session, like we had a couple of those, they were amazing, right? People came out for those too. And, you know, your people would make me the muddled, not the Moscow Mule, but the mojitos, right? And with the real mint, the fresh mint, dude, it was wonderful, right? My people were there, your people, and we invited a bunch of people. But always there's the tension below the surface. Always there's that you got to go home and be by yourself eventually. You got to eventually sit with the results, right? The wake of your actions. And that's the unmanageability. Because at the same time you're talking about, within a year or two, dude, I would lose jobs as a result of my acting out. Because I pivoted for a minute to like storyboarding. I was trying to like cast a wide net, right? I just needed to work however I could.
Right.
And it became less and less manageable. I couldn't act out. And for me at the time, it was mainly pornography. I could not stop acting out. I literally would almost get caught by people coming by my apartment or visiting or knocking on the door. I don't know. I have no shame in saying this, man. This is the stories that I share so that people can relate, you know, or get help if they're like, oh, fuck, I don't want to be there. It's like there before the grace of God go I, right? Dude, I literally was like pulling up my pants sometimes, like trying to answer my door, click the computer off, you know, straighten things out, you know, sweating, cold, fearful. It was terrible. It was terrible.
I mean, it's the same as someone knocking on the door and you're putting your needle away or you're untying the, you know, around your arm. So
make sure the blood is like, you know, clean up the blood.
Right. It's all the same. And so, you know, it's not about the behavior. It's about, I mean, it's not about the thing you're addicted to. It's about the behavior, right? And so you said 9 years old, you were exposed to pornography. And I was, you know, I was a little bit older, but I was also young. And I mean, we're talking like 80s where you had to know someone to get some material. It's not the internet, right? And so, and then having that image in your back pocket until it was like disintegrated, right? But yeah, dude, my parents are always working, so I was exposed to, you know, the Playboy channel on TV and, you know, pornography and magazines and all that kind of stuff. And so for you, how did that impact you? So as you grew up as, when did you, because at that age, you don't know what addiction is. You're just, you know, exploring and this feels good and it's shooting chemicals in your brain and you're curious. But at what point, talk us through the evolution from that 9-year-old Sean to how it actually became a problem. You realize, oh shit, this isn't, you know, I got to do something.
Yeah. There are pretty clear markers. And I won't go exactly chronologically just so I can make my points a little more succinctly. But there's something that I share with clients, which is this terror that I have. Every now and then it hits me. And I call it the Plato's cave, because that's what I liken the addiction to. And because Plato's cave was this literary or this philosophical image where people are in a cave, but they got blinders on.
Yeah.
There's a fire in the middle of the cave and they're looking at the wall and all they can see are smoke and shadows and they think that's life. And it's not until the blinders are taken off, someone unshackles them and frees them, and they walk. Not only do they realize, oh, fuck, I'm in a cave, and all those images were just images, just shadow and not reality, but then they walk out of the cave and they're like, there's a whole fucking world out here. So that's what being in the thick of the addiction is, where people aren't yet even at the point where they even acknowledge, right? Because in 12-step, they talk about acceptance. You hit bottom and you're like, you have that God moment, you have that. And again, when I say God, I'm not doing the Christian, no religion or anything. I'm just saying whatever your spiritual thing is, you hit that and then you realize you have to course correct. But they hit that moment and then decide which way to go. But that realization is profound. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, I've been in that this whole time. So that's what really scares me about the years between, say, 9 and I'd say around 20. How old were we in 2000, John? Like 27, 28?
Yeah,
right?
late 20s, late 20s.
So I have an anniversary now, and it's in November. So if I hit mid-November in about a month and a half, that'll be 14 years sober, 14 years abstinent from all the things that I threw into what's called an inner circle. And there's an outer, there's a middle, there's an inner, and that's just one of many constructions you can use, because we're talking behavioral addiction, right? So it's not as simple. Not that alcoholism or any other drug recovery or substance abuse isn't simple, but it's not like don't pick up the needle, don't have alcohol in your house, don't go to a bar, right? It's all in us, which is why it's sex and love addiction are more likened to like an eating disorder, like overeaters. Some of us sex addicts really relate to, because you have to eat, you have to have sustenance, you have to have water. Same thing here, because we're not talking explicitly just sex. We're talking intimacy. You have to have intimacy. You have to be with someone, body, mind, spirit, like you always say. Mm-hmm. And so how do you do that, but not do it to the point of self-destruction? So I when I finally got sober, I was married, still got divorced, but we have a great divorce, and stayed sober till, like I said, about 14 years. But right around when I knew you, a couple of years after the time period you're talking about, that's sort of the halcyon days of the club and everything. Yeah. Right around 01, 02, and it's get this, it's a kind of a cosmic joke. It's Cinco de Mayo, which everyone's always out, right? Being jackasses on Cinco de Mayo, right? Putting on their fake sombreros and just drinking themselves like crazy with margaritas. Every Cinco de Mayo, John, I go and I either meditate somewhere, or I take the day for myself, or if I am with family, like I'm pretty calm, inward, not negative, but just self-reflective. Sure. And that's because it was when I was in the Marina Del Rey, and you and I would see each other here and there after that. In fact, we would have the one New Year's together with you and your then wife and me and my then girlfriend and wife. Yep. So right around then, I was just sitting in my room. I didn't want to go out and join the party with my homies, Damon and everybody. Everyone's smoking, drinking. I have no problem with that. I'm not like some prude. I'm saying I sat in my room and I just wanted to write like we did. And I thought, this is terrible. I don't want to write. I just want to keep masturbating. Something's wrong. So that was the awareness. It didn't get me sober, dude. It would be almost another decade before I get sober. It'd be about 6-7 more years. But it was the first time that I went, this is not right. Like, I can't stop some of the shit that I do.
Wait, was porn and masturbation, did you gravitate toward that more than the actual sex? Meaning,
yes, for sure. 100%. As a matter of fact, there's a little bit, again, so much of the, I feel like sometimes it's pretty esoteric. Like I'm trying to be like this secret club, but it's not. It's just that I think it's very misunderstood.
Right. No, it is. Because no one talks about it.
Right, because no one talks about it. Exactly. Yeah. We still have that weird puritanical bullshit, like, oh, no one has sex. Babies just come out of nowhere. It's like, what the fuck? So It was mainly porn, and it was mainly porn. I don't know what else to say besides that. Movies, whatever, and then once it went from magazines to internet, oh my god, dude, like going from cocaine to crack, dude.
Yeah, of course.
For real.
And
like,
then
I could just sit
also
in my
it's unlimited. I mean, it's like, yeah, you're right. I mean, once it came into your phone, it's now in your house. And I mean that,
right.
So like the kids these days, I don't know what's going to happen to them, because like, at least for us growing up in the 80s, it was hard to get, but now, holy shit, on your phone with 2 clicks, you could have anything, unlimited.
Anything.
It's just like, yeah, you're right. It's like going from, M&Ms to crack.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. So I have a lot of concern for the kids coming up. I know from some of the 20 something, now they're in their 30s, but back then they were like millennials. They were talking to me and they were like, dude, I can't get it up because I keep clicking around. I'm like, you are saying out loud exactly the 1-to-1. Now, if you want to do something about that, I'm here for you. But if not, like, that's not going to change unless you change it, right? Unless you work on it. So you're absolutely right. I mean, and they were just divulging without even, like, I wasn't like out there like I'm a coach and whatever. Like, I was just having conversations with people I worked with or were acquaintances or whatever, and they would just divulge this stuff. So yeah, dude, it was mainly the porn. And here's an interesting thing. This is the esoteric stuff I was going to talk about. There are people who identify as sexual anorexics. And also you can be both. So it's kind of like just being on the opposite end of the spectrum, because again, it's not about quantity, it's about intimacy and quality.
Right.
So, which is also why when people think I don't think I come off judgmental very often, but if people think I'm making a judgment about something, I'll say right now on the record on your show, like, we can debate about porn. We can debate about the culture of it. You can talk about gender issues and stereotypes. And is it healthy imagery of women and men, or whomever is on the screen, men and men, women, it doesn't matter who, but is that healthy? Is that real? We kind of all agree, no, it's fantasy. That's what it's for. Right. And also, I don't know about you, but even in our day, when it was that early internet stuff, it was getting kind of violent. I'm not going to lie. It was getting kind of like, it was getting a little ugly sometimes. And you'd be like, whoa. Yeah. Or you wouldn't go, whoa. You'd be like, oh, I got to gravitate. I got to get more and more and more, which is why they say addiction's progressive, right? Recovery's progressive, but addiction is also progressive. You go for harder.
Yeah. It takes more. It takes more for you to get the high and
get the hit. Right.
Yeah.
So my point about all that is I wasn't dating much when we were in those days you were talking about. I was stuck with the porn. And if I wasn't, if I somehow got away from that vice grip, I was like asexual. I was just, and that's no disrespect to people who are actually culturally or psychologically asexual. I'm saying that.
Oh, you're one extreme or the other.
Yeah, I couldn't, I had so much shame. Like I was telling you how it's right behind my eyes, right under the surface. I couldn't talk to girls. I couldn't go out and like, hey, you should be with me. It's like, I felt like a piece of shit. So so it was one extreme or the other, man. It was terrible. And that's when I said, like, Cinco de Mayo, 2001 or 2, I think it was 2001. I just was sitting in my room going, I need to do something. I just had no fucking idea what.
So is that when you found 12-step, or did it take a lot more of those moments for you to then hit your quote unquote rock bottom?
It took more of those moments. It took getting into what was a pretty freaking amazing relationship, having kids, moving out here to New Mexico. And, they call it a geographic. Addicts call it like, oh, I'll just move. I'll just go to another state, get another job in another place. It's like, yeah, but you're still you. Right. So you just took the addiction with you. It's called a geographic. It's like, no matter where you go, there you are.
Yeah.
So we moved out here, and those were like maybe the 3 to 5 years where you and I didn't talk much because I had moved, and you were just becoming, I think, a therapist and really starting to build up. And I got a therapist in LA, but I couldn't get sober with her. She was amazing. It was no fault of her own. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready till I was ready, right? And then I started to mess around with jobs out here and almost lose job opportunities out here. And then my marriage imploded. And I was like, okay. I
Wait,
need help.
why did why did your marriage implode? Was it because the lack of intimacy? Was it because she didn't approve of you watching porn? Were you distant? Or I guess all the above, right?
All the above, all the
Yeah.
above. I mean, to my, I won't name her, name her here, but to my ex's, to give her some credit, she even at one point was like, maybe we integrate it, maybe we use the porn, whatever. And it's like, that's it's secretive, it's isolating, it's my secret. It's like Lord of the Rings, my precious, right? I don't want to share that with anybody. That's like my little drug. That's
So
like my little stash.
you tried that and it didn't work for you.
Did not work. And so, it's not just that you're doing the acting out. It's not just that you're shutting down from your partner, and all these other manifestations at work or whatever. When I say, and when others in the Fellowship of Recovery folks say, it doesnn't just affect your sex life. It affects everything. So I was more rageful. I think I've shared with you before that I had rage issues. I was endangering, like, ooh, dude, am I going to be a bad dad? Like, what the hell? Because I had 2 little ones.
Right.
So thankfully, I hit that bottom. I actually called that same therapist I just mentioned back in LA and was like, Karen, I don't know what to do. I can't stop acting out. I probably didn't say acting out. I probably just said, I can't stop watching porn. I'm destroying my marriage. My wife is like, wants to kick me out, and rightfully so. And I'm rageful. Everything's falling apart. And dude, I'll never forget this. And I share this every anniversary I have. She said, Sean, listen to someone who knows better than you.
Mm.
She said, and then she like, get into 12-step, get a therapist immediately, stop acting out, go do that now. But that first part, that early, because you're right, because there's so much ego and shame, and you're just in your own way.
Right.
And she said, I know you're calling me, so heed my words. Listen to someone who knows better and go do it. Dude, I did it immediately. Finally, I was ready to hear the message. I had a therapist, and I went to my first 12-step within a day of that phone call, and that changed everything.
So for 14 years, you haven't looked at any porn?
That's correct. Now,
that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, have I seen things that I should probably stay away from? Like, it's like the movie or there's that, like, right? Like, I have to choose what movie I want to watch,
That's just living in our world, man. Like, you can't choose what billboard, is on the bus or
No, absolutely. And especially online, dude, I will tell you, the thing that I laugh, like, it's great if you can be bemused about these things, right? As opposed to like, oh, God damn it, and shit on yourself all over again. The self-compassion is critical. And John, honestly, in almost 14 years, I probably have only hit that hardcore self-compassion where I don't even go, at first. I just go, nah, man, it's cool. It's, you know what this is.
Right.
Probably the last 3 years, probably since right before pandemic or right in there, where I just got to just a different level of, dude, like, there's no need to beat yourself up. You spent from, what do we say, 9 to 28. You spent, no, not 28, 34, 35 or something, right? So you spent 24, 25 years in it.
Tunnel, yeah.
It's still going to be pieces, remnants. And also it's hard when you're just, I could look you up, John, and then the ads on the side of the, screen will give me something because I clicked on something else the other day or like this website or that website. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about, being bemused. I laugh when I'm just like, oh my God, I'm getting triggered from some like ads on the side. This is ridiculous. Yeah. And I will say too, again, for fear of sounding like a prude or whatever, and I tell this to a lot of my sponsees, I'm like, dude, also, if it's a man, and say it's a heterosexual man, just for sake of the example, and I counsel anybody. I don't give a shit who you want to be with or how you identify, to make that clear. But I sometimes remind some of the newbies, I'm like, dude, you know what? Yeah, you're an addict, and you got to work hard on this. You got to live this. And at the same time, you're a man who has eyes, and the eyes are attached to your brain, and the brain is the brain stem and the nervous system, and all that's attached to your dick. So you're going to see things, and you're going to feel things, and neurons are going to fire off, and you can't beat the fuck out of yourself every single time that happens. It just, you'll just be miserable, right? And so I tell myself the same thing. So no, I haven't looked at hardcore pornography in 14 years.
Wow, that is that's especially in the world that we live in, man. That's how much discipline it takes. But I guess when you turn it into a lifestyle, it gets easier. Of course, I remember in my 20s, when I was looking at porn a lot more, I remember where, because I have the addictive gene. My dad's an alcoholic. My mom's dad is an alcoholic.
Same.
I remember you would lose track of time, and this is actually what scared me was getting into the tunnel. There's dopamine firing in your brain, and you're clicking or downloading or whatever, or watching a movie, and there's like this numbness that happens. And I think people who aren't or can't relate to addiction, they don't know what I'm talking about. But there's like this numbness that happens, this ringing, and suddenly 4, 5, 6 hours has gone by.
Absolutely.
And this is when you realize how powerful this can be. And this could be anything. It could be heroin, it could be porn, whatever you're addicted. It could be gambling. You could sit at the gambling table and, a week could go by and you could have not slept if you're, a gambling addict. And so addiction in general, it throws you into this very slippery well. You could escape. You don't have to think of anything. There's, of course, the feel goods and dopamine and chemistry happening in your brain, and you basically check out of the world. You check out of life, and you lose track of time. And I think that is why it's not sustainable. That's just the state. And on top of that, if you have issues with, anger, rage, or anything like that, you could also be very destructive to friendships, relationships, obviously people you love, children, all that. So, man,
absolutely. Yeah.
So how did you start climbing out? 12-step worked for you, right?
Yeah, it was a combination of 12-step and talk therapy. Mm-hmm. And my therapist out here in New Mexico, was a recovering addict himself. And then just happened to have a lot of us sex addicts as well as other addicts on his roster. Because he just knew the addiction language. Like you say, speak the language. Like that, I learned the language from him. Yeah. So he just was really good, man. And you know what? You would have appreciated him. He's not dead. He's just retired now. But we would have like Goodwill Hunting moments, man. Where I'd go in there, I'd call them pushback sessions, Matt Damon and Robin Williams, like face to face, right? Remember when Matt like disses the painting and he puts him up against the wall? Yep. Now, he never put me up against the wall, but we got face to face a couple times because I was like, this is bullshit. I'm getting the fuck out of this session. He's like, sit the fuck down. Right? Because I was just still so full of like rage and, feeling defensive, feeling I was being told that, I'm an asshole, I'm in the wrong and whatever. And really what he was doing the whole time was like, I'm not telling you you're bad I'm telling you the things you've done have had bad consequences. The things you've done are unhealthy. Sure. And I always emphasize that now with my own clients, right? And it's not taking responsibility. You have to take responsibility as part of this process. But it's also stopping the thinking around the shame spiraling, right? And you just go down and down and down. Oh, I'm such a piece of shit. I can't do that. And that's why people keep using. That's why it's so hard to get off the treadmill. So like you were saying, like the thing that just happened was I just had that moment of clarity. That's what I was thinking of earlier when I said God shot or whatever. It's a moment of clarity when that one therapist told me. And the next day I was like, yeah, I can't do anything. I keep doing the same shit. It just, plenty of people told me before that. It just finally took when I was ready to hear it.
Let me ask you this, love addiction. A lot of people are confused by it. Like, how can you be addicted to love? That doesn't make sense. Tell us what you know about love addiction. Because when I was in training to become a therapist, I went to all the meetings, meaning, Al-Anon, SAA. And I remember in the sex addiction meetings, it's mostly men, like 90%. And then in Al-Anon, it's mostly women. And I remember, love addiction and people being confused that love can be an addiction. So,
right.
How is that? Tell me.
It is tricky. Don't get me wrong. It's hard to articulate, and it's easier actually if I'm with a client who, once we start talking and sharing, they start to realize they're like, oh, this isn't about the fucking part. This isn't about getting that guy, getting that girl, getting that person in my bed. This is about the fantasy and the lead up to it and how much of my life I'm willing to sacrifice and not tend to for this other person in a romantic way or in the hopes of having a romantic relationship. And that's why some people even identify as fantasy addicts, because they don't even get into the relationship part, right? It's wild. So
it's almost like it should be called love fantasy addiction, because what makes it confusing is people say love addiction, but we're talking about, like you said, sometimes it doesn't even get intimate. It's about or it doesn't get intimate in a healthy way. It's the fantasy of it. It's the the chase and all that people can become addicted to, and that's love addiction.
Right. And I mean, and that can be sex and love. There are a lot of people who just want the chase, and then as soon as something happens, of course, they can't actually bond, right? Because they're addicts. They can't actually have the intimacy once it's availed. So they're like, oh, fuck it. And then they just repeat it over and over and over again. In SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, they identify the object of our affection as a qualifier. And it's a little tricky word, but they're comfortable using it, and I'm not too bad with using it either. That's like the person who qualifies, in quotes, me as being the love addict. They are the person I am objectifying, I have unrealistic expectations about. I'm really not probably approaching them to just ask them on a date, build a relationship, see if they want to build a bond, right? I'm just in the back like voyeur, but like touching base every now and then, or driving by the house, or obsessing constantly. If they're a coworker, right? Always hanging on the peripherals, but not fully engaging, right? And then it's also people who are engaging and are in the relationships, but again, they've lost themselves. Your lady is, Vanessa's this like codependent master, right? And it's so wild because I know that there's Codependence Anonymous. There's I think it's CAA, CO, Codependent, CDAA. I can't remember what the acronym is, but what the shortcut that I use when it's getting a little fuzzy when I'm talking with someone and they're wondering about like, what's a love addict, what's a sex addict, what's this, what's that. I think codependence and love addicts are very similar. It's just we more often, and talk to Vanessa about it, and I could be wrong, but we more often think of codependence like with the Melody Beattie, right? Who's like the person for codependence and wrote all the books on it. It's like her and her mom.
She's on my podcast next week, Melanie Beattie.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna listen. I'm totally gonna listen. Are you serious?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
That's awesome. I'm gonna totally listen.
But that's old school, and that's and I think she takes codependency through the door of addiction, which you're kind of talking about now.
Yeah. Which is what Vanessa said. That again, I was like, how have I been in recovery? Because at the time when Vanessa said it in a group that I was visiting, jumping in of hers, it had to be part of the Tat Lab thing. So it was like 12 years in at the time, let's just say 12 years into my recovery. And she was like, and we all know that codependence, it's an addiction, right? And I was like, Jesus Christ, I know people who are in Codependence Anonymous. And for her to just say it, I'm like, yes. So then that's where I started to marry the terminology, like codependency, like love addiction will have that sexual or romantic bent to it. That's obsessive, compulsive, addictive, etc. Codependence can or cannot. It can be your mom. It could be your friends. It could be your boss, right? There are people who talk about like this weird vibe with their superior, right? And that they're enmeshed. It's weirdly enmeshed. So I hope that's a little bit helpful, but it's helped me. Because I'm like, they're kind of similar. It's just that one isn't romantic. Traditionally, you don't think of codependence as necessarily romantic, whereas love necessarily is.
Right. So 12th step, you get sober, and then you start actually working in the field, right? I remember you came and visited me in LA, and you were already behind the podium giving speeches and stuff in that world.
Yeah, man. And, I don't have regrets, so I don't say this like beating myself up. Well, I try not to have regrets. It's not bullshit. But I'm much better at that than when I was a younger man. But I wish I would have had a little more confidence to see what you were up to back then. And I'm pretty sure you invited me. Like, dude, like, check out what I'm doing, or maybe we can talk. Because it was still it was earlier social media. It wasn't, you're a freaking pioneer in all of that. And you were right at the cusp of that. And it was, I couldn't tell you what year that was, but it was the LA conference. And I spoke in front of like 80 people or something in a packed room. And dude, I had this major anxiety attack. And dude, get this. It's that big. It was down by the airport. It's one of those huge convention centers by the airport. And my sponsor ended up walking down the hallway at the same time I'm having this anxiety attack. And I'm about to turn in and go do my session and lead a session for the first time, like ever. That scale anyway. And I was like, dude, I'm freaking out. And he just held me. He's like, you'll be fine. He said basically what you say. He's like, you know what you're talking about. just talk what you know. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. So yeah, dude, I started to speak at bigger conventions like the international ones and the national ones. And I've been doing a lot locally. I've been doing a lot of smaller retreats, 12-step or non-12-step men's groups.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until about 5 years before Tat Lab, you invited me in. And that's when you first said, dude, you speak the language. Why don't you just come talk to folks? So that was a really good experience. But I hemmed and hawed. And I mean, legit, not just beating myself up again, but I legit took a different turn and went a different career for a while. And you know what that is. I was still headed back towards Hollywood.
Right.
And then once I stopped that, but in the production end, right? And then I just was like, I love that coaching shit. And right when I was getting my ICF, I don't have my ICF certified yet, but I'm qualified for the test. And right when I called up the coaches, Linda Bark and the Wisdom of the Whole methodology group, dude, you called seriously within like 24 hours. I was like, this is the freaking universe giving all the signs.
Yeah.
And that was 2.5, 3 years ago. And so it was great because I was getting my practicum at the same time that I was already coaching through Tat Lab.
Yeah, and now you're coaching. Now you've done a lot in the last couple of years. Meaning you've run groups, you've taught, you've spoke, you've coached. It's like you've really played with everything now. And what are you building now? What are you swimming toward? What do you feel called to do, and what excites you in that world?
So I will always be creative, right? Like I'm so stoked for you that sitting back years ago, 20-somethings at Karma, right? Karma on Cahuenga or whatever, somewhere around there in Hollywood.
Yeah.
The cafe, right?
Cafe, yeah. Wait, hold on. We went to not only that, but we were at Lulu's Beehive. Yeah.
Lulu's Beehive in the Valley, Sherman Oaks. Yeah. And right on Ventura. Love that place. It's not there anymore. But so I like you, I definitely aspire to get a book done. But again, God shot time, universe speaking time. I was just planning podcasts and getting the equipment and all the stuff when you rang out about this one. I was like, all right, I gotta listen to what the universe is saying. And the only reason why I hadn't between the end of Tat Lab and now was because I had a very intensive, good project. It had nothing to do with coaching per se. It was more my social justice stuff. But I let the coaching quiet. And then as I was feeling, I was like, I got to get back. That's where my heart is. I really am contented, right? I don't want a boss anymore. I'm almost 50. Fuck that. Yeah. And I love serving individually. Yeah. And if I can do that and then still write at night or whatever the fuck I want to do, be with my teens or whatever before they go off to college, great. And then, dude, you and like so many things were like, yep, podcast time. So I'll be doing a podcast. I'll be joining, yours, and then, see if eventually I can spin off and get my own. And I'll definitely be writing in the near future, man. For sure.
Love it, man. I think you're going to crush the podcast medium. I could just tell, just because you're charismatic, you speak, you're creative. So you don't just speak like information, but there's there's poetry behind how you speak. Hey, thanks, for anyone who's listening and there's, that maybe they don't know if they're addicted, and it doesn't matter if it's love, sex, heroin, whatever. For someone who's been through the tunnel, for someone who's been sober for 14 years, and I'm sure you still every day, it's somewhat of a struggle. What can you tell them? What kind of advice would you give them?
If they're new or if they've been in it a while?
Either. So I have a friend who he gets sober for a while and then his wheels fall off and then we don't see him for a week. And he just, he fucking goes, and then he comes back and then he's like, all right, I need to, and it's just that pattern, man. It's addiction is one of the hardest things just to, it really is, man. You need solid handrails, man. You need a village, I think, Yeah.
Right. Which is, I'll answer your question after I say this, which is why, just like with Tat Lab. So it's interesting that you mentioned that most of the dudes were in, like, say, 12-step, and most of the women were in the other one, or the SAA versus the Al-Anon.
Yeah.
Most of the clients, the vast majority of clients I had during the pandemic were women, and so and I don't have to worry about the statistics. I don't care to worry about the statistics about whether they were sex, love, fantasy, codependent, any of that, a combination. Like, who cares? But So that helps to sort of break away the stereotype, right? Of it's just dudes in a dark room, like, oh my God, my porn issues, right?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's, dude, I've heard, former, like, Leave It to Beaver type housewives who just nuked everything. I've heard it from two women who were, two women partners and their kid, and one of them is in recovery and is working on it, right? And so what you're saying about handrails, it's what I would always say to the tat labbers, and what I say to all my clients: we don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
Because that's what the addiction wants. The addiction wants just you and it isolated, and its only goal, dude, you're gonna love this. And I this will be a good nug for a later podcast, but I'll just say it again then, and who cares? Dude, it's the Terminator, man. Remember Michael Biehn? Remember Reese? He's like, it doesn't care. It doesn't feel remorse or pity or pain. It will just keep coming after you until you are gone. That's it. There's no other rule. There's no other point. It was once, for a lot of us, a survival mechanism from abuse, from isolation, like latchkey kids like you and me, from whatever the negative stimuli was. But what I say is, for a lot of us, it was a security blanket, a survival mechanism that became a barbed wire coil. Right?
Ooh,
what once used to comfort you right now is killing you.
Describe how it was a survival mechanism. So when you're younger and you turn to addiction, how is that survival? Is it survival to fit in? What's the survival piece?
Not to fit in, like, say, with my peers so much, because again, when they would bust out, or my cousins would bust out like a Playboy, I was like, ugh, because it wasn't a group thing for me. It was my own little private stash.
Yeah. Got it.
But it was more, I had an abusive household. I'm honest about that. I talk about it. God bless my parents. They did their best, but there was both physical and emotional. And I've been honest about my father. I mean, he is, to this day, still a porn addict, man.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's ever going to hear this podcast, but I'm also not going to lie about it.
Yeah.
Right?
And to protect yourself, so you're escaping in that addiction.
Right.
Yeah,
like, it's been a shitty day, yelled at, this and that. Or if it's just a shitty day, it has nothing to do with my parents, so I'm just feeling insecure, feeling bad. Right. Oh, instead of like the Doritos and Coke, which I would normally do, Coca-Cola, not cocaine, which was my go-to, right? Because we've talked about this before. I think yours was like crunchy Cheetos, but I was like Doritos and soft Cheetos and Coke. That would be my kid's drug, right?
Yeah.
Well, instead of doing that all the time, I would go to the porn. And instead of drawing, which I did, or writing, like you and I both do, I would go to the porn. It would just be another thing. But then that starts to overwhelm and push out time and space and energy for the good things, the drawing, the writing, the exercise, right?
And you know what? If you can't relate to porn, and most people can relate to eating their feelings, right? Most people can relate to sitting on the couch and eating ice cream if they're feeling lonely or if they're rejected. This is what you
or drinking. I mean,
right.
Or drinking. I mean, that's, drinking is like a national pastime. So imagine having to get sober from that when everybody in America, right, what's the percentage? I don't know, but we're okay with it. It's the drug we're okay with. And it is a drug. It's not bullshit. So that would be tough too. Just like it's tough driving around, like you said, billboards or ads on the screen for a porn or sex or love addict. But what I would tell someone is, like you were asking, if they're getting into recovery, whether it's early or deep into it, I have a sponsee who's like, dude, I want what you got, like 14 years. It's fucking amazing. Oh my God, I've got 2 years now. I just want, and I'm like, that's great if that helps you, but just still take it one day at a time and don't take it alone. And it's very 12-step. And again, man, I'm not anti anything. I mean, if people don't want the 12-step part of it, I don't beat that down. I don't stuff that down people's throats, but it's just the basis that I come from. And we could talk about anything. We can talk about structures of consciousness or whatever. And the more I learn about this stuff, the more I'll share. I'll offload with the clients. But it really is, you don't have to do it alone. Don't try it alone. It necessitates a fellowship. It necessitates the guardrails, like you're talking about, of people with you going through it to remind you you're not a piece of shit. You're not alone in the world. You don't have to isolate. We can walk with you through this process. And also, one fucking day at a time. That part of the 12-step is just gold, because it's like, why would I worry about what's happening next Tuesday? Let me just handle today, right? Which is also a very Buddhist thing too, like just be present. Right. So all that stuff overlaps.
Yeah, I love how simple and potent that is. And also, I'm going to say it to anyone who's single, because the singlehood journey, although not an addiction, can be tied to shame, loneliness, and a lot of negative thoughts, beliefs, all of that. Add the ticking clock and advertising and distorted versions of love and all that. So even with people who are single, and I've been single for long stretches, one day at a time. And what Sean says, you don't have to do it alone. And that's probably why you're listening to this, because you're single and you don't want to do it alone. And so this is why we're building this community. And also, Sean, what's the name of, or do you know yet what the name of your podcast is going to be?
I don't have the name of the podcast right now. People want to hit me up. I've got my Instagram page, which is Sean Cardinalli, and there are a lot of videos on there, just little bits and pieces, nuggets of my experience, and both as a recovering addict and as a coach, experiences I've had in this area. And then I am on Facebook, although I'm not on it as often as I'd like, and that's Sean Cardinalli, Life Coach. I should probably change it to just coach or something. It's weird saying life coach, but you know me, dude, I always give away my email and my phone. I'm like, call me up. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Give away your email. And yeah, I was going to ask, where can we find you? Don't give us your address, but your social media.
Don't show up at my door. 310-994-8958 is the cell that, I encourage my clients. I'm like, you know what? I can't pick up 24/7, but if you're having a shit day and you are triggered every 5 minutes, fucking text every 5 minutes. If that helps you, do it. I'm totally fine with that. Don't be self-conscious about that. And then the email is Sean, SEAN, Paul, PAUL, 73@gmail.
Yeah, hit Sean up. He's a powerful catalyst. Well, Sean, thank you for this interview, and you're going to hear a lot more from Sean as he continues to share, his story, his wisdom, tools, tips, all that. And when he launches his podcast, go check him out there too. Thank you for listening. Be well. I hope that episode was helpful. Hey, listen, if you want to share your singlehood journey, if you've gone somewhere and come back, if you have revelations and wisdom, please share your story. It's going to help other people. Nothing makes us feel more connected than hearing other people's stories. So just send me the audio of your story, and you could just record it directly from your phone and email it to theangrytherapist@gmail.com. Also, if you want our Single on Purpose newsletter, go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life. You will get tools and articles and other people's stories, and also Zoom links to private gathers. So if you want to join our community, go to singleonpurpose.life. Thank you for listening. Be well. We hope you tell a friend.
Hi, my name is Brenda. I've been single for going on 5 years now. I divorced the father of my daughters back in 2017. A little bit about my story. That was a very codependent, toxic relationship where alcohol and substance abuse was involved. A lot of lies, manipulation, just the struggles were real. I had no idea, zero idea that was what was going on. And we were young parents, raising 2 little girls back to back, no break in between. So as you can imagine, I mean, there was just so much on our plates, no time for us to even date, get to really fully know one another. That relationship was just very rushed. It was what it was, but all that to say, we agreed that divorcing each other was, at that time was what was necessary in order for us to move ahead and be good parents to our 2 young daughters. So fast forward to today, we are great co-parents. Now, I believe that we have mastered that co-parent relationship, because there's so much that I have learned and worked on and I have healed within myself in order to also coach and teach him the psychology behind the boundaries and manipulation and hard no's and non-negotiables. And so I'm confident that because I am able to lead, he follows very well. So we're able to have a very healthy co-parent relationship. Back to what I'm learning actually in actually still being single is just knowing what you want, asking yourself, or for me, asking myself, what is it that I want? What is it that I'm looking for in a man that is going to present himself to me and show up at my door? To me, that's something that I always ask myself. And I think that it's important that women out there in the same boat as I am continue to ask themselves that. Everybody's different and their needs and wants are different as well. But for me in particular, I'll just kind of tell you how I've survived singlehood. I kind of toyed and played around with the idea of getting on dating sites. And, that didn't work so well initially. And then here recently, I decided to take a break just because I felt overwhelmed without having no structure, no guidance, as far as really knowing what it is that I'm looking out for out there on the dating sites. I think that's extremely important, because there's a lot of crap out there. And so all I can say is in order to survive, go into it knowing what you want. Ask yourself, what is it that I want? That way you can show up in the dating scene with good intentions, and that person's going to know it as well. How I thrived in the past when I was being intentional, and that's the key word, is being intentional. I feel like we're all constantly trying to heal, trying to work on trauma or things in our past. And for me in particular, it has helped me tremendously knowing what is my intention, knowing that I'm going all in regardless of whatever date I'm going on today, tomorrow. That helps me in showing up 100% and not having any expectations really behind it. That I cannot tell you how much of a breakthrough that has been for me in order to not overwhelm me or start out with that overwhelming piece, so to say, in your mind, like getting out of your head. So I feel like that's what helped me thrive in singlehood. Now, currently, I choose to be single just because I have so much that I'm working on personal growth, and I feel like it's a distraction. But having all those tools underneath my belt, I'm confident that when I'm ready to step back into the dating scene, I know it will pay off in the long run, and I'm ready. Hope this helps. Thank you.